In the beginning, God made man in his image. It's such a powerful statement and understanding to think that we were actually created the way God decided to create us and created us just like him. Such a powerful place to be, I think it gives so much identity and power to who we are as human beings. Yet, the grand statement I want to make is that Adam chose Eve over God. We know the story, man is made in the image and likeness, God breathed in him and man became the living soul. Then he gives him clear instructions on what to do. You can eat any fruit in the garden, you can eat all of it, but the tree of knowledge of good and evil, don't eat from. It's a very simple instruction that should be able to be followed. There's no mystery to it. There's nothing you got to decipher or get revelation. It's just a very clear instruction. Yet when the moment of truth actually comes in the story, if you're familiar with it, it's in Genesis, Adam chooses Eve over God. He decides to eat the fruit instead of listening to the instructions that God gives him. And it seems to be the age-old story of us as mankind. We tend to always fall for what we are infatuated with, what we desire, what we've taken a liking to, what we want out of life. And we fall in love with these things so much that we end up choosing these courses or choosing these paths or choosing these ways over the ways that God is telling us or the identity that God has called us to be. You know, knowing that this has happened, it makes me rethink how I function, makes me rethink how I do things. One of the main things that makes me rethink how I do things is how Jesus handles it. You know, we always say the statement, Adam and then the first Adam and Jesus, the second Adam. And it's a crazy comparison because even though Adam chooses Eve over God, or Adam chooses his bride over God's will or God's identity for him, Jesus doesn't do it. I know people think Jesus came for the people, came to help the people. But the people being helped was a result of Jesus doing God's will. He would make a statement, and I never understood it for years. He'd be like, nobody's left houses or lands, or forsaken houses or lands, mothers or fathers, wives or children. I was like, man, that's the most important relationships in the world. Your mama, your daddy, your possessions, your wife, your children. What you mean forsake them? He said, but there's nobody that's done that for the gospel who won't receive 100-fold of all those things right here on earth. And he's really trying to tell us that the things we're running after, are trying to produce, or trying to desire, they actually come from us. They actually are multiplied from us doing his will and doing things like he wants us to do it. And so I see Jesus, even at the end, Jesus says, Lord, if you can't let this cup pass. He's thinking, man, I can help so many more people. I can do so much more stuff. But then he makes this powerful statement that we sometimes tend not to make. We don't even get this far. We always want to pray for what we want. We always want to go for what we want. But then he says this, nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. Truth be told, and this is a blanket statement, this is a period statement, that there's no way to go against this, that God's will for you is bigger than what you want for yourself. It's the bottom line truth. And so being able to seek his will instead of what we want all the time, knowing that he already knows what we want before we even ask him. I mean, the scripture even says that. And so I take my example from Jesus versus seeing what Adam does, which is, and this happens in relationships, this happens with possessions, this happens with jobs, careers, all kinds of things. Sometimes we take so much affection on what we want or what we produce or what's we allowed to connect to us. We have so much affection in that we forfeit our true identity in God and lose out on the grand scheme and the grand plan that God has for us. So the statement is, Adam chooses Eve over God. What are you choosing over God? Good question. Yo, if you know somebody that needs to hear this, maybe a friend, maybe a family member, somebody that's going through something similar to this, send this link to them and let it be encouraging to them.